One of the ideas that Reverend Chris Wilson has asked me to think about a little bit is the degree to which the 19th century non-subscribers could be considered as Christian universalists. Universalists in the sense of thinking about salvation being available to everyone. And these are ideas that were to be found in the early church and have re-emerged in more recent centuries. And certainly I think it is true that we can see universalism in this sense very clearly in their theology. For some it led towards what nowadays might be called Unitarian Universalism, and for others it has taken a direction that we might define as Christian Universalism. And we might remember that the 19th century non-subscribers, the leading theologians at that time, certainly the more conservative ones, did emphasise the fact that they were Unitarian and did reject the doctrine of the Trinity. But I think that something that concerned them very greatly was kind of geometric relationship that you might perceive between this and the doctrine of the atonement, and that it was really the free nature of Christ's voluntary sacrifice that redeemed humanity, and that's what was key to them, not any complicated interrelationship in the nature of God himself. And I think that this is very important. I personally am inclined to follow William Bruce, the elder in this, the great minister of First Church, who emphasised mystery and who, rather than delve too closely into these ideas, acknowledged and hallowed the concept of mystery. But for Montgomery and for Bruce and for others, we can certainly see this idea of the capacity for universal redemption in their theology. And for Montgomery, we see this reflected in the idea of deeds, not creeds. He's very concerned in human behaviour and the impact that our own lives and behaviour has on our capacity to be redeemed. But the person who looks at this perhaps most closely is William Porter. We might remember that William Porter was clerk of the General Assembly at the time of the Remonstrance, and so he was very highly regarded, despite the fact that he was considered to be suspect in his theology. He was highly regarded by the subscribers as well as by the non-subscribers. And he was the father of John Scott Porter of First Church and of Clason Porter, minister of Larne. And in 1840 he delivered an address to the Remonstrant Synod, and the Remonstrant Synod that year was held in Newry, and it had been expected that it would have been addressed by John Mitchell, Reverend John Mitchell, the father of the noted Irish nationalist figure John Mitchell. Newry was John Mitchell's congregation, but he died suddenly in February 1840. He died of what's described as a bilious fever, contracted as he became very cold while conducting a funeral. And only a few weeks earlier, in December 1839, James Armstrong of Dublin had died, Reverend James Armstrong, another greatly beloved and highly regarded non-subscriber minister, and he collapsed suddenly after conducting a wedding. He had just conducted a wedding ceremony, went and sat down and suddenly died. And so these two deaths came as a great shock and a great loss to the non-subscribers. Two of their leading figures had gone. And shortly before the Synod of 1840, William Porter's sister-in-law, the sister of his second wife, died, from Miss Frances Clason, and she had been a very active and very noted Dublin non-subscriber. So he had personal reasons as well as the loss of these two great ministers underlying his reflection. And he talks about the relationship between the living and the dead, and of the capacity of the dead to have a beneficial influence on the living and to be almost guardian angels. He actually uses that terminology, the dead looking after the living. And he also looks at the concept of universal salvation. Now, Porter seems to hint, and this is something that might take him a little further than Montgomery, that universal salvation is absolutely available for everyone, whereas Montgomery tends to say we can be saved, we need to contribute to our salvation. So William Porter seems to regard the afterlife as a period of constant approaching perfection. We can never perhaps attain the perfection of God, but throughout eternity we are constantly being drawn closer and closer to it. And so we almost might see that there's a scale. Where do we start on this? And he does talk about punishment, about purification, and that the afterlife may be a period of purification for the people whom he describes as impenitent. So this may suggest a difference between his approach, that absolutely everyone will move toward perfection, and Montgomery's, which suggests that we have a greater degree of responsibility. Of course, these thinkers thought differently, they were individuals, and they had the right to personal judgment. But I think it is William Porter who reflects for us most clearly the nature of universalism in 19th century non-subscription. And he addresses it very, very thoroughly and in great detail in his address of 1840. And this, when we think about it, has interesting implications for how we consider the sacraments. And so we'll think about that next time.